Hi everybody, we are today going to be working on multiplying integers. Once you get the hang of this, I believe this is even easier than adding and subtracting integers. It comes with a really nice pattern that students tend to attach to really well. So we are first going to talk about Google translating these numbers, so it will make sense in your head. You can say these words in your head, and please do that, especially the first day of your work here, because what it will do is it will just reinforce what we are doing. So I started with the known. You already know what 4 times 2 is. You probably made it when you were in first or second grade. But remember, this multiplication sign means of the. So we have talked through the of the in the past, but we're going to really need to concentrate on that in this lesson. So in 4 times 2, we are looking at 4 of the 2's. So if I had little counters or little 2 bars, I would have 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2. Okay, Mrs. McKinley, that's a lot of words to say 4 times 2 is 8. Work with me here, because we are now going to add a negative. So if we keep the multiplication sign, meaning of the, we are saying 4 of the negative 2's. 4 of the negative 2's. So I wrote it out in Google Translate. That's like saying negative 2 plus negative 2 plus negative 2 plus negative 2. Well, if you repeat that, you are going to get a negative 8. The same is true of this one, only it's just a little bit more complicated to translate overall. Let me show you. It's negative 4 times 2. This first negative sign always means the opposite of. So if I say the opposite of 4 of the 2's, that is like saying, okay, I want 4 of the 2's, 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2. So in these parentheses, there would be a positive 8. But on the outside of it, we need the opposite of that. So it will be a negative 8. Notice the pattern that you see right here. I'm not going to state it, but we're going to talk about it in our next section. This is the trickiest one of all. We are going to do negative 4 times negative 2. And the answer is counterintuitive, meaning your brain has a hard time making sense of it. So this is like saying, I'm going to circle this in red, the opposite of 4 of the negative 2's. So let's start with just the 4 of the negative 2's and see what we get there. We have negative 2 plus negative 2 plus negative 2 plus negative 2. Well, that's negative 8. That's pretty obvious. But we need whatever the opposite of negative 8 is, we need that as our final answer. The opposite of negative 8 is positive 8. What just happened there? Let me explain it in terms of chocolate, because this makes it all understandable. A negative times a negative is like saying, I can't not eat chocolate. Notice that these 2 negatives end up meaning I have to eat chocolate. I must eat the chocolate. So the 2 signs being negative actually kind of counterintuitively to your brain, but when you Google Translate, it's the opposite of the last part of it. So the opposite of 4 negative 2's is going to be a positive 8. There's a pattern here that students really focus on. And if you have this memorized, you're going to do great on quizzes, tests, and the like. So if you have a positive times a positive, obviously your product is positive. Positive times a negative, your product is always negative. Negative times positive, it's always going to be negative. Negative times negative is a positive. I had one student one year say that these magically float in the air, and this one does an acrobat trick and makes this one into a positive. That's how he remembered that. That's not really mathematical, but it was a great picture for that student. This right here, this pattern is what you really need to focus on. Let's try these. You are welcome to try them together with me as I go, or you can simply, you can pause it. So whichever you would like to do is, and this is over here a -7. I tried to write my negatives in red because in our checkbooks we talk about being in the black. That means you have a positive balance, which is what we want to have. If we're negative, we are in the red. And we're going to use playing cards to represent positive and negative numbers as we go through this. So 9 times 8, and this is two positive numbers right here. I know that it's going to be a positive 72. You do not need that positive, but what I have trained a lot of my students to do is right away look at what this is. We are going to have the opposite of 2 of the -11s. So I want to Google Translate that. I also go up here and see a negative times a negative. I know it's going to be a positive. 2 times 11 is 22. So if I Google Translate this, this is 7 of the -7s. So 7 plus 7 plus 7 plus 7 plus 7, 7, but it's -7 plus -7 plus -7. I also see that I have a positive and a negative. Oh, so I see that my answer is going to be negative. I know 7 times 7 is 49. All right, here we have the opposite of 8 fours. That's how we Google Translate that. Opposite of 8 fours. So if we do that, 8 fours is 32. I'm thinking it's -32. If I look up here and I do negative times positive, it is a negative and 32. Evaluate the expression when m is 5 and n is -8. So -m times n. So we are going to substitute in -5 times -8. Well, right here I'm looking and I see up here that negative times negative is going to be a positive, and 8 times 5 is 40. You could also say the opposite of 5 of the -8s. So that would be a -40, but then the opposite of that would be +40. Let's try n to the 3rd power. This one, it is so important that you write this out. When you do this, you are going to do -8 times -8 times -8. So when you look at this, 8 times 8, and that's 2 negatives, this is going to be a positive 64 right here. And then we're going to multiply a positive 64 times a -8. Okay, if you want to figure that out on your own, you could pause me, but I see a positive and a negative, so I know my final answer has to be a negative based on what we've got going on up here. And I do happen to know that the solution is 512 if you do the arithmetic. Notice that when you have negative, negative, that's going to be positive, times another negative, that's going to be go back to a negative. So odd numbers to the power of 3, 5, 7 is going to be negative. To the power of 2, 4, 6 will end up being positive. Okay, we're going to do the final one. Evaluate these expressions if x is 3 and y is -2. So in this one, I'm just going to slip it in and put the answer below. Sorry about that. 6 times y. So we are going to do 6 times -2. And I see that the signs are opposite, so I know that it's going to be negative. 6 times 2 is 12. Y squared. So let's do the substitution of -2 times -2. So I see that the signs are the same, so I know underneath it, it is going to be a positive, and 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, let's try y to the 3rd power. So that's going to be -2 times -2 times negative 2. So negative 2 times negative 2 we already saw is a positive 4. So I'm going to note that here. That's what it is. But we're going to have to multiply that times negative 2. Well, the signs are opposite, so I do know that the answer, the product, is going to be negative. 4 times 2 is 8. The opposite of 3 times 2. So it's a negative 3 times a negative 2. Again, what is the opposite of 3 of the negative 2's? Well, 3 of the negative 2's is a negative 6, and then it's going to flip and be a positive. So I know that it's going to be positive. 3 times 2 is a 6. Please refer to basically pages 592 to 93, and there's also a Khan Academy video linked to this if you need any additional explanation. Hopefully my Google Translate up here will make sense as to why it works, and that you will also remember the pattern. You should have a great lesson. Please do this in 2 separate sessions today and tomorrow, and we will work together at finding the answer.